Not all cities in the US offer a great quality of life. Some struggle with high crime rates, economic downturns, and dwindling populations. In this eye-opening video, Virtual Travel by Brian reveals the 10 most miserable cities in the US, ranking them based on key factors like unemployment, poverty, and overall urban misery. These top 10 most miserable cities in the US are places where residents face daily challenges that make life far from ideal. Whether it's crumbling infrastructure, job scarcity, or high living costs, these cities have gained a reputation as some of the worst cities to live in the US right now. But which city ranks at the very top? You might be surprised. Join us as we break down the most miserable US cities and explore what makes them places many people are choosing to leave. If you're thinking of relocating, these are the cities to avoid in America. Watch until the end to see which city ranks number 1, and it's getting worse. Before we dive in, have you lived in a city that made you miserable? Or are you living in one? Let's discuss this in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe to Virtual Travel by Brian, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video from Virtual Travel by Brian. Let's jump right in. Number 10. Newark, New Jersey. Alright, kicking off our list at number 10, we have Newark, New Jersey, the city that constantly feels like it just missed its train to success, which, ironically, is something that happens a lot at Penn Station. If you've ever flown into Newark Liberty International Airport and thought, wow, I can't wait to get out of here, well, you're not alone. Newark has been battling economic hardships for years, and let's just say the fight isn't going well. The poverty rate sits at about 26%, which means over a quarter of residents are struggling to make ends meet. And when you compare that to the national poverty rate of around 11%, it starts to feel like Newark is playing life on hard mode. Unemployment is another uphill battle, with the city consistently ranking higher than the national average. Finding a good job here is like trying to find a parking spot in downtown Newark. Possible, but at what cost? And then there's crime. Ah yes, the topic that Newark just can't seem to shake. The city's violent crime rate is more than double the national average, and property crime isn't much better. Now that doesn't mean you'll get mugged the second you step outside, but let's just say you wouldn't want to go for a casual midnight stroll without keeping one eye on your surroundings and the other on Google Maps for the fastest exit route. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Newark does have its bright spots. It's home to the Prudential Center, where you can watch the New Jersey Devils play, because nothing says coping with a rough city like watching hockey players legally beat each other up. And if you're into culture, Branch Brook Park has the largest collection of cherry blossoms in the US, which is great if you want to feel like you're in Tokyo for about 3 weeks every spring before reality sets back in. At the end of the day, Newark is that friend who just can't catch a break, constantly trying to turn things around, yet somehow always finding itself stuck in traffic on the Pulaski Skyway. It's got potential, but as of right now, Newark is still a tough place to call home. And that's why it lands at number 10 on our list of the 10 most miserable cities in the US that will shock you. Stick around because the cities only get rougher from here. Number 9. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Welcome to Oklahoma City, a place where the wind comes sweeping down the plains, and so do the crushing waves of sadness. Seriously, something about this city just has people feeling down, and not just because the local basketball team has been in a permanent state of rebuilding since Kevin Durant left. Let's start with the depression rates, because, wow, they're higher than your uncle at a Willie Nelson concert. Studies show that about 24% of adults in Oklahoma City experience major depressive episodes. That's nearly 1 in 4 people walking around feeling like the city just stole their lunch money. It's like OKC collectively woke up one day and said, you know what? Happiness is overrated. And if the depression wasn't bad enough, the divorce rate is also putting up some big numbers. Turns out, love in OKC has about the same shelf life as a gas station burrito. Oklahoma ranks among the top states for divorce, and Oklahoma City is leading the charge. Maybe it's the economy, maybe it's the stress, or maybe people are just realizing halfway through their vows that they should have swiped left instead. Whatever the reason, if Marriage in OKC had a Yelp review, it would be 2 stars and full of regret. Now let's talk about the vibes. Oklahoma City has a way of making you feel like you're stuck in a country song, but not one of the fun ones where you drink beer and dance on a tailgate. No, this is one of those songs where your truck breaks down, your dog runs away, and your wife leaves you for your best friend. It's not hard to see why the mood is so low. Between economic struggles, unpredictable weather, hello, Tornado Alley, and the fact that the most exciting thing happening is a new gas station opening up on I-40, it's easy to feel a little uninspired. That's not to say OKC doesn't have its redeeming qualities. The city has a decent job market and a relatively low cost of living, so at least when you're sad, you can afford to be sad in a bigger house. And if you're a sports fan, you can always watch the Thunder play, assuming you enjoy heartbreak in both your personal life and your NBA fandom. At the end of the day, Oklahoma City is like that person you went to high school with who always seemed just a little too tired and emotionally drained for their age. It's got potential, but it also has a whole lot of reasons to make you want to take a long, contemplative walk through one of its many gray and windy parks. Number 8. Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky, home of the Kentucky Derby, world-famous bourbon, and a general sense of meh that lingers in the air like the humidity on a July afternoon. If you've ever wanted to live in a place that's known for horse racing, but feels like you're the one losing the race, then Louisville might be just the spot for you. Let's talk economy, because, well, there's not much to talk about. The average household income here hovers around $60,000, which sounds decent until you realize the national average is nearly $75,000. So if you live in Louisville, there's a good chance your paycheck stretches about as far as a horse's legs in the Derby, except you're probably not winning any prize money at the finish line. The job market? Let's just say it's about as unpredictable as a horse that should have won but decided to stop mid-race to sniff the grass. And then there's the mental health situation, which is not a bright spot. Studies show that 23% of adults in Louisville report experiencing major depressive episodes, meaning nearly a quarter of the city wakes up every morning wondering if it's really worth it to go outside. It's like the entire city collectively sighed and said, yeah, we're not really feeling it today. And honestly, with the gray winters, economic struggles, and the fact that the most exciting part of the year lasts 2 minutes, shout out to the Derby, who can blame them? Now, Louisville does have some perks. The bourbon scene is top-notch, because nothing says coping with economic struggles and high depression rates quite like a smooth glass of Kentucky's finest whiskey. But even then, there's only so much bourbon can do before you realize that, well, you still live in Louisville. The city also has a decent music and arts scene, but it's not exactly thriving enough to pull it out of misery territory. At the end of the day, Louisville feels like a city that's just kind of there. It's not the absolute worst place to live, but it's also definitely not making any best places to live in America lists anytime soon. It's like the middle child of U.S. cities, not successful enough to be impressive, but not failing hard enough to be infamous. Number 7. Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to Birmingham, Alabama, a city where the weather cries more than its residents, which is saying something, because the depression rates here are through the roof. Seriously, if Birmingham had a motto, it would be something like, come for the history, stay for the existential dread. Let's start with the mental health situation. Studies show that nearly 24% of adults in Birmingham experience major depressive episodes. That means almost 1 in 4 people in the city wake up every morning thinking, well, this sucks. And honestly, can you blame them? Between the struggling economy, the high divorce rates, and the never-ending rain, Birmingham isn't exactly handing out good vibes. Speaking of divorce, Birmingham's rate is one of the highest in the country. That means love in the Magic City disappears faster than your paycheck at a barbecue joint. Maybe it's the stress, maybe it's the economy, or maybe people just realize halfway through their vows that they'd rather be alone than sit through another rainy afternoon with their spouse. Either way, if you're looking for romance, you might want to swipe left on Birmingham. And let's talk about the weather, because, wow, it rains here a lot. We're talking nearly 60 inches of rainfall per year, which is more than Seattle. Yes, Seattle. You'd think a southern city would be all sunshine and warmth, but nope. Birmingham is out here pretending to be the next great water park, except no one's having fun. Studies have shown that gloomy weather can contribute to seasonal depression, so if you already weren't feeling great, congratulations. The forecast is sad with a 100% chance of mood swings. Now, it's not all bad. Birmingham does have some cool things going for it. The Civil Rights District is packed with important history. The food scene is actually pretty solid. Shout out to Alabama barbecue. And if you're into college football, you'll fit right in. But for every highlight, there's an "oh wow, that's depressing" moment waiting right around the corner. At the end of the day, Birmingham is like that one friend who's always going through something. You want to root for them, but every time you check in, things have somehow gotten worse. Number 6. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee, the city where the crime rates are higher than Beale Street's bar tabs, and the economy is struggling harder than a tourist trying to eat dry ribs without making a mess. If you thought Memphis was just about Elvis, barbecue, and the blues, well, you're half right. Because the real blues here isn't just in the music, it's in the daily struggles of living in Memphis. Let's start with the crime rate. Because Memphis is unfortunately making all the wrong kinds of headlines. The city consistently ranks as one of the most dangerous places in America, with violent crime rates 4 times the national average. That's right, 4 times. That means you're more likely to get mugged here than you are to hear "Walking in Memphis" playing in a souvenir shop, which, let's be honest, is basically on loop. It's like Memphis looked at other dangerous cities and said, "Hold my beer." And then there's the economy, or what's left of it. Memphis has a poverty rate of around 25%, meaning 1 in 4 people are struggling to get by. Job opportunities? Let's just say they're about as rare as a tourist who doesn't try to do an Elvis impersonation. And if you do manage to find a decent-paying job, congrats. Now, just keep your fingers crossed that your car doesn't get stolen on the way home. But hey, let's not be too harsh. Memphis does have its bright spots. Beale Street is an absolute blast, as long as you keep an eye on your wallet. The barbecue is legendary. Seriously, don't leave without trying some, and the music scene is top tier. If you can ignore the crime, the economic struggles, and the general feeling that the city is one bad decision away from a country song, Memphis can be fun for a weekend. At the end of the day, Memphis is like that one friend who peaks at the party but crashes hard the next morning. It's got soul, it's got flavor, but it's also got a whole lot of problems. If you're shocked by these cities so far, just wait. It gets even worse. Before we dive into the top 5 most miserable cities in the US, take a second to smash that like button, because let's be real, this list deserves it. Subscribe if you love eye-opening content like this, and drop a comment below telling us if you've ever been to one of these cities. Alright, let's keep going, because the next city, oof, it's rough. Number 5. Stockton, California. Stockton, California, the city that tried to make it in the big leagues, but somehow ended up filing for bankruptcy instead. Yep, in 2012, Stockton made history as one of the largest US cities to go broke, proving once and for all that not all that glitters in California is gold. Sometimes it's just overdue bills and shattered hopes. Stockton's financial struggles have left the city in a permanent state of "we'll fix it later," except later never seems to come. Public services? Strained. Infrastructure? Holding on for dear life. Job market? Let's just say finding a good job here is like finding a parking spot in San Francisco. Nearly impossible, and if you do find one, it's probably a scam. Unemployment has been a long-standing issue, with rates consistently higher than the national average, making Stockton one of the most economically distressed cities in the US. And then there's the crime. Stockton's crime rate has been twice the national average, meaning walking down the street here isn't exactly a carefree experience. Property crimes? Sky high. Violent crimes? Let's just say Stockton's got enough of them to keep a whole season of cops busy. It's the kind of place where you don't just lock your doors, you triple-check them, and maybe say a little prayer for good measure. Now, Stockton does have some redeeming qualities. The city is surrounded by beautiful farmland, which is great if you enjoy looking at scenic fields while contemplating why you're still living in one of the most miserable cities in America. It's also somewhat affordable compared to the rest of California, but let's be real. Affordable is a relative term when the rest of the state is charging a small fortune for a broom closet. At the end of the day, Stockton is like that person who went all in on a bad investment and now spends their time dodging debt collectors. It had potential, it had dreams, and then reality hit hard. Number 4. Flint, Michigan. If there's one city in America that's become a cautionary tale, it's Flint, Michigan. You know a place has it rough when the water itself makes headlines, and not in a wow, look at this beautiful natural spring kind of way. No, Flint's water crisis became one of the worst public health disasters in modern U.S. history, and years later, the city is still trying to recover. Let's talk about the water crisis, because there's no way around it. In 2014, Flint switched its water source to the Flint River to save money, but instead of clean drinking water, residents got lead contamination, bacterial outbreaks, and a whole lot of government excuses. Imagine waking up one day to find out your tap water is basically toxic sludge. Yeah, not ideal. People got sick, trust in public officials completely evaporated, and even today, many residents still don't fully trust what comes out of their faucets. But as if undrinkable water wasn't enough, Flint also grapples with major economic struggles. The city's poverty rate is around 38%, which is more than triple the national average. That means nearly 4 in 10 residents are living below the poverty line, making everyday life an uphill battle. The job market? Not great. Unemployment rates have been consistently high, and even when people do find work, wages are often barely enough to scrape by. It's like playing Monopoly but starting the game already in debt. And then there's crime. With high poverty comes high crime rates, and Flint is no exception. The violent crime rate here is more than 4 times the national average, meaning a casual stroll down the street might come with a complimentary sense of paranoia. If you live here, you don't just lock your doors at night. You reinforce them, double-check the security system, and maybe even consider moving to a bunker. Now, Flint isn't all bad. The people here are resilient, and there have been efforts to rebuild and improve the city. But let's be real. When you're known more for your contaminated water than anything else, it's tough to shake off that reputation. At the end of the day, Flint is a city that deserved better, but never got it. Between the water crisis, the struggling economy, and the lingering crime issues, it's easy to see why Flint lands at number 4 on our list of the 10 most miserable cities in the U.S. that will shock you. And trust me, the next city isn't much better. Number 3. Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome to Cleveland, Ohio, the city where even optimism seems to be on a permanent lunch break. If you've ever wondered what it's like to live in a place where the economy flatlined, crime skyrocketed, and sports exist solely to break hearts, then congratulations, you're probably already in Cleveland. Let's start with the economy, or rather the lack of one. Cleveland has been struggling for decades, ever since the manufacturing jobs packed up and left town faster than a Browns fan in the fourth quarter. The city's poverty rate hovers around 30%, meaning nearly 1 in 3 residents is living below the poverty line. And the unemployment rate? Let's just say finding a good job here is like finding a sunny day in December. It's rare, and when it happens, people make a big deal about it. Then there's the crime rate, which is definitely not winning any awards for improvement. Cleveland consistently ranks among the most dangerous cities in the U.S., with violent crime rates well above the national average. Walking around certain neighborhoods at night isn't just risky, it's basically a live-action version of Grand Theft Auto, minus the cheat codes. If you're moving here, just know that locking your doors is less of a safety measure and more of a survival skill. And let's not forget Cleveland's sports scene, which is both a source of pride and deep emotional trauma. The Browns? Decades of pain. The Cavaliers? They had LeBron, and then they didn't. The Guardians? They're trying their best. It's no wonder Cleveland fans have trust issues. This city's sports teams have been letting them down since forever. But hey, it's not all bad. Cleveland does have some great food, a solid music scene, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Because nothing says, we've got nothing else, like a museum dedicated to people who don't actually live here. But even with these bright spots, the city still feels like it's stuck in an economic and emotional recession. At the end of the day, Cleveland is like that one friend who's always saying, "This is our year." But deep down, everyone knows it's not. Number 2, Gary, Indiana. If there were ever a before and after photo of the American dream, Gary, Indiana would be the depressing after picture. Once a booming steel town, Gary was living large, jobs were plentiful, the economy was thriving, and the city had a pulse. But then, like a bad breakup, the steel industry packed its bags, left town, and never called back. What was left? Unemployment, crime, and more abandoned buildings than a zombie apocalypse movie set. Let's start with the economy, or what's left of it. When the steel mills started shutting down, Gary's job market collapsed faster than a poorly built sandcastle. Unemployment rates soared, businesses closed, and what was once a working-class powerhouse became a ghost town with a zip code. At its peak, Gary had over 175,000 residents. Today, barely 68,000. That's right, over half the population said, "Yeah, I think I'll take my chances elsewhere." And can you blame them? Crime in Gary is no joke. The city regularly ranks among the most dangerous places in America, with violent crime rates nearly 4 times the national average. It's the kind of place where you don't just lock your doors at night, you bolt them, board them up, and maybe say a prayer for good measure. Walking around certain parts of Gary at night? That's a level of bravery reserved for action movie heroes and people who don't value their personal safety. But if crime doesn't scare you off, maybe the abandoned buildings and eerie emptiness will. Entire neighborhoods sit vacant, streets lined with crumbling houses, broken windows, and overgrown yards that make every corner look like a Scooby-Doo mystery waiting to happen. In fact, some parts of Gary are so deserted that nature has literally started reclaiming the land. Which is great if you're into post-apocalyptic scenery, but not so great if you're trying to live a normal life. Now, Gary does have a small claim to fame. It's the birthplace of Michael Jackson. That's right, the king of pop himself came from here. But let's be honest, even he didn't stick around. The Jackson family got out as soon as they could, and considering the state of the city today, that might have been their best career move ever. At the end of the day, Gary is a city that time, industry, and even its own residents have left behind. It's eerie, it's dangerous, and it's got about as much life left in it as an unplugged toaster. And that's why Gary lands at number 2 on our list of the 10 most miserable cities in the US that will shock you. But if you thought Gary was bad, just wait, number 1 is even worse. Number 1, Detroit, Michigan. If there's one city in America that perfectly embodies the rise and fall of an empire, it's Detroit, Michigan. Once the crown jewel of American industry, Detroit was the city where dreams were built, literally. It was the heart of the automobile industry, home to Motown, and a symbol of American success. But fast forward a few decades, and now, Detroit is the poster child for economic disaster, urban decay, and crime-ridden streets. Let's start with the economy, or as Detroit likes to call it, the ghost of prosperity past. Once a booming hub for car manufacturing, the collapse of the auto industry hit Detroit like a semi-truck with no brakes. Unemployment soared, businesses shut down, and residents left in droves. At its peak, Detroit had over 1.8 million people. Today, barely 630,000. That means nearly 2/3 of the city just got up and left, which explains why entire neighborhoods now look like nature documentaries on abandoned civilizations. Speaking of abandoned places, Detroit is basically the world capital of urban blight. We're talking about over 70,000 abandoned buildings, some of which have been sitting empty for so long that they've become tourist attractions. You know your city has a problem when ruin photography is one of its biggest industries. If you've ever wanted to walk through an actual dystopian wasteland, save your money on post-apocalyptic movie sets and just visit Detroit instead. Now let's talk crime. Because if there's one thing Detroit is known for these days, it's sky-high crime rates. Violent crime? More than 4 times the national average. Property crime? Let's just say, if you leave your car unlocked, you might as well leave a thank you note for the thief. The city consistently ranks as one of the most dangerous places in America, which means living here requires the reflexes of a ninja and the paranoia of a conspiracy theorist. But here's the thing. Detroit is still standing. Despite everything, people here are tough. The city has been through economic collapse, crime waves, and enough abandoned homes to start its own ghost town festival, and yet there's still a spark of resilience. There are efforts to rebuild, new businesses trying to make a comeback, and people who refuse to give up on the city. And hey, at least the sports teams are... Okay, never mind. So, there you have it. Detroit takes the #1 spot on our list of the 10 most miserable cities in the US that will shock you. From economic disasters to crime waves and abandoned streets, Detroit is the ultimate what went wrong city. Which city on this list shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you made it this far, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into America's most fascinating places. Thanks for watching Virtual Travel by Brian. See you in the next video.